Stay with you, Danny. Should he retire? And where would you rank him? Since you brought it up in the middleweight divisional history amongst the greats, how would you rank him?
Yeah. Amongst the grades, I think that's a very easy answer. I would consider him number two, Anderson Silva number one.
Yeah.
I think he is the second greatest middleweight to ever do it in the UFC. And as far as where if he should continue fighting or not, this is a little bit of a tougher question because, as you guys mentioned, Goes and Dan, like he did look good in that first round. Like he does still look like a very quality fighter in terms of technique. You saw him out there; he's not out of shape. It's just his reflexes are a little bit slow. He's a little bit more predictable now since he's been around for so long, and probably his chin has weakened a little bit and he slowed down a bit. So could he continue fighting? Yes, of course. I do think he's for sure, a top 15 fighter in the world in terms of the middleweight. And I'm pretty confident to say he's probably a top 10. Like that's pretty easy to say. So he's not screaming like retire now, like Tony Ferguson or other fighters that we've seen in the past, or like Chris Weidman. So he could continue fighting if he wants to, and I don't have a problem with it. The problem here is he's such a big name. Is like, who are you going to face? Because usually there's a correlation between being a really good fighter and having a really good name, a big name. So I don't know if he wants to stick around to sort of fight the Shara Bullets of this world and those sort of interesting matchups. I don't know if that's his vibe. If he wants to continue fighting contenders, I would say, look, retire. If he's okay with just doing fun fights here and there, then sure, I wouldn't mind him continuing fighting. But his title days, I'm pretty confident in saying that they're over.
All right, good stuff there. I'm going to ask the same of Goes and Dan, but before we get to them in the chat room, which a lot of you come through YouTube and Facebook, let us know. Put 1, 2, 3, however deep you want to go. The greatest middleweights ever. Mine, now that Danny brought him up, I think I'd go Anderson Silva, Israel Adesanya, and then Chris Weidman, I think, might be my third. Although I'd have to look at what Weidman did and what Whitaker did, because Whitaker can't match him on title defenses, but man, did he have a nice run at middleweight prior to running into the Israel Adesanya, the last style bender. So do that for me, chat, and I'll read off some of the best ones that we have. I know I've fallen off on that a couple times in the last few weeks. I maybe it's that rust from the holidays where we didn't do SBC for a few weeks, but I'm gonna see if I can bring that back to the fold. The better ones, the more respectful ones, get in, and if you're funny, that's right down my alley as well. Goes, how about you, man? Next for Izzy, showing him the door, or would you like to put him up against someone? Time off, a little bit of everything, and then who's your greatest?
I think the UFC is losing a lot of stars as of late, right? And back in the day, it was so easy to replace them. And I don't know that that's happening at the level that it used to. I think Izzy still has juice, but he has to restructure his goals. And the UFC has to kind of figure out what direction they want to go with him, right? Like, is the plan for him to stick around and maybe pick off a couple people? Because like Danny said, a title, I just don't really see it. I know crazy things have happened, but this it would be difficult for Israel Adesanya to put together any type of streak. And it's weird because I feel like he could probably beat 80% of the division. That's just that top echelon, I think, is going to kind of they're going to kind of have their way with him. So do I think he needs to retire? I don't think so, because I think you could still make money and still they could put on fun fights that are worth his time and worth the UFC's time. Where he stands as far as GOAT status, I think it's a similar argument to what we were doing with Kamaru Usman back in the day, right? He was, for some people, he caught GSP. Other people, he was kind of on his heels. But we needed the dust to settle a little bit for that to really clear up. And I think that's kind of what's playing out here. The dust is settling, and I think we still, even though he has a win over Anderson Silva, I still believe we have Anderson Silva above him.
Yeah, and Chris Weidman has 2 over Anderson Silva, and yet same thing. That's how great Anderson Silva was back in the day, folks. But I understand that in MMA, I think fans kind of latch on, right? Like the double dutch. It's like you're waiting, you're in. But you're in when you're in, right? If you became a fan in 2017 or 2020 or whatever, you don't even know or can't even connect with 2003, 2008 or whatever. But it's fun, and it's all available there on the UFC's Fight Pass library to go back and see some of these great moments. All right, Dan, Tom, I know I'm giving you a little bit of nostalgia. Let's hear from you. What is your your top middleweights ever, your list there. I don't know if you want to do a Mount Rushmore or whatever. And then what would you do with Izzy next?
Yeah, middleweight's funny, right? Because like I could be like, I'm not even the contrarian because you guys were around and watching it more than I was. But like, are we talking pride middleweight division? No. Obviously, we're talking about 185 pounds, guys. Let's keep it kind of simple here. And I agree, Anderson #1 and Adesanya #2. And great points about the head to head, guys. Head to head obviously has a lot more play when we're talking about things like when George is talking about rankings, for example. Obviously, carries probably more weight there. But in this discussion, it is interesting, right? And I won't go back in any lightweight rants, but you can have the same amount of title defenses. You can even beat a certain guy, but that doesn't mean you have a more legacy. It didn't mean you inspire people more than them, right? And no matter how you rank it, even throw in Georgia's Chris Weidman in there, when I did the top 5 middleweight fights of all time, right? There were non-UFC fights in there, but as far as the greats go, you saw Anderson, you saw Chris Weidman, and you saw Israel Adesanya come on that list a lot of times before I had to whittle it down to 5, right? So they definitely put the work in. Great input, great list there, guys.